You ever had words from a song or a line from a movie or a couple of words from a book stick with you and just reside with you? Like you keep muttering them to yourself. And maybe if somebody hears you, there's just no context. It's not going to work. You seem like a weirdo. Maybe that's just me. The reading from today, oh my gosh, I have been muttering this myself for years. The bruised reed he will not crush. A smoldering wick he will not quench. These are the words from the prophet Isaiah, talking about a promise that is yet to come. Talking about a time when God will not leave God's people alone, no matter how bad things get. That the bruised reed will never break, that a smoldering wick can never be quenched. And Jesus, in his fullness, is the promise fulfilled, the fulfillment of this Isaiah vision. And I've been muttering this as coming up to Advent because there has been such a time for the last month or so of feeling bruised. Like the light has been dimmed, that there's been a smoldering, and maybe it's the culture we live in. Maybe it's just me personally. I've got a couple of anniversaries that haven't been the good ones. The dropping temperatures, the lessening of all the sunlight outdoors, and it just feels like I need a little bit more hope. I need a little bit more. And last week, one of the things I told you, what did I tell you? What was my favorite Christmas hymn? Remember? The music's Oh Holy Night, right? And with last week, it was Christ the King Sunday, so we talked about fall on your knees. Well, for this one, I kept muttering a smoldering wick, a bruised reed, and it reminded me. Oh, now it just fell out of my head. What's before a thrill of hope? This is the test. Before a thrill of hope. A world in never pining till he appears, and the soul felt its worth. That's the smoldering wick. That's the bruised reed. Have you felt your worth? Do you know your worth? What does it take for you to know that worth? In the Christian tradition, we hold not some distant clockmaker God who set the world in motion and is not involved. We believe that in the fullness of time, God came as Jesus to say to you, to me, and to everybody throughout history, you are valued beyond measure. That nothing you can produce can ever equate to the depths, height, lengths of your value in the sight of your Maker. Where, oh people, have you been able to experience this? Have you ever come to know it? For some, it's a spiritual grace. It's like this, it's a dawning of a moment of prayer. It's a feeling that the living Jesus just is in your face and won't let you go. And that can be a real grace for folks. For others, it's embodied. This has gotten dropped so frequently by so much of the Western church. Post-Enlightenment, the Enlightenment really got us all in our heads. But for the bulk of Christian history, the fact that God gave you a body to live and move in, that was one of the ways you could experience the holy, that you could know God's value in you. Some of you might remember the movie Chariots of Fire. Yeah, a couple of head nods. Because another one of those quotes that lives in my head forever. When I run, I feel his pleasure. It's all about this runner and being able to run. They feel the presence of God and the blessingness, the love that God is loving that he's running. When I run, I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack. I don't run. This is not a body for running. This is a show pony, not a workhorse. I just let all of you in on a very inside joke amongst the staff. Show pony, not a workhorse. But there's, what is it for you that, it can be a hobby. It could be when you're with your kids. It could be when you're cooking. You got a guy who goes out to the garage. Why? So he can just abide with a car. There's something in your life that when you're doing it, you transcend your body. It transcends time. You kind of go into this state where it's a flow, it's a movement. Anything could happen, but you're on it. It's while you're singing, cooking. That flow, if you've got a Disney Plus membership, watch the movie Soul. That's exactly what this is. It connects you to something heavenly. Feel your worth. This is why they say, chase your joy or find your passion, because when you can reside in that, you can really feel what you're worth in that practice. I think an extension of that is being able to watch and be present for other people who join into that experience. Have you ever seen, there are moments when you watch a professional athlete doing their thing, it looks like they're doing something they've always known. They were born to do. There are churches, the way they are constructed, the very physical space, that is an expression of art, of care. That when you just sit in the presence of some of these Gothic cathedrals, or just a space where you realize God is big and you feel connected. Why? Because this person is expressing a devotion to God, or this team has expressed a devotion of God that draws you in. The whole practice of sacraments in the church is a measure of which human interaction with God can draw one close. The number of moments, we're going to celebrate communion, the number of moments that have been truly touched by holiness, because we believe that this is one of the moments where heaven and earth meet. Human action and God's divine grace. The best way to know your worth is also one of the hardest ways. It's also one of the ways that is filled with landmines, potholes, slowdowns, dead stops, U-turns, wrong directions. But when it's right, it's like nothing else in this world compares. And that's people. Other people can show you exactly what you're worth, if but for a moment. Of course, the first people who are meant to show us what we're worth are our parents. Not everybody got that memo. Some parents were so flawed, it is very hard to see our own value in their example to us. Some parents are parents in title alone. But if you had parents like mine, you grew up in a house filled with love and care. I had a church member, after my mom passed, she was one of these church members who I never said, all I'll say is, she blew me away, because the most profound statement I had ever heard came out of her. When she says to me, when your mother dies, one of the most clear symbols of God's unconditional love leaves this world. Stopped me dead in my tracks. I couldn't argue that, because that was exactly what my mother was to me. A sign of unconditional love. And sometimes that can happen for all sorts of other people. I mean, that's what you hope in a partnership, in a spouse, somebody who reflects back to you. It's a give, a take, a dance throughout life, that after decades, you feel the sense that they truly know you. It wasn't too long into my marriage where, gosh, it wasn't a special day. It wasn't like an anniversary. She was just putting on her coat and hat. It was a winter. She had this coat, and there isn't a word. I knew her, and it's not like I knew Bethany like I knew what she's thinking. I could probably tell you what she's thinking, like, why hasn't he picked up his shoes? Like, it was like I could tap into the harmony of the music she was living in. Like when I saw my wife, it was the best English word I could give you is I was behold. It was a 360 presence. And to not be able to do that for somebody else, to have that done for you. I mean, this is the kind of thing that can change your life. And to know that this is what God does for you. When God sees you, when God beholds you, all of you, the real you, the you beyond all of the projections that you want other people to see or that you want for yourself, no matter the distance between your ideal, who you think you should be, and who you are right now, God sees all of that and still desires you. So maybe you've had that. You have felt your worth. As a church, the mission of the church, the mission of anybody who follows after Jesus, Jesus always is running towards people, trying to tell them their value, no matter how on the sidelines, separated, lost, and alone, Jesus runs to them. And as soon as they have captured that moment, Jesus sends them to share that with others. How do you practice? How are you one of those people that lets other people know that they are loved, cared for? We are going into December. How many of you have got at least one Christmas party that you're not looking forward to? Or maybe you've got a Christmas party that you are looking forward to because there's so many people. The extroverts in the room, like it's just more people and more chances to be happy and to share, to be present for. The reason why I gave such a long-winded bit about why it's sometimes the best, because human beings created in the image and likeness of God, sharing that love of God can change your life. It can also be hard because human beings are flawed and imperfect people. Maybe you have somebody who's hard to like, hard to love. Maybe the holidays are one of those times that you're forced to be around them. Yeah. Well, first, this is the practical advice. Before you walk in, that person is somebody God created and would rather die than be God without. That is, if you don't start with that, the rest is pretty impossible. I can give you ways to navigate awkward social situations, but if you really want to change your heart and theirs, you start with the premise, because you believe that about you. You believe you are created image and likeness of God. You are valuable beyond dollars or cents. No matter how to measure a human life, your value surpasses that. And now you're taking that value and extending it to somebody else. And sometimes it's hard, depending on who they are. In one of my very first ministry settings, I met probably the most difficult person I have ever met. And it's not even close. I mean, I don't even come close. It has never been close to the most difficult person I have ever met. She was an 88-year-old lady in a nursing home. And for the first 2 years of me being present, I'd visit her once a month. She called up my administrative council, my SPPRC, and my district superintendent and said, "My pastor is not visiting me enough." I'm like, "Okay, I'm coming." For 3 months, I made it a point. On Thursdays at lunch, we're coming to see you. And I reported back every week to my chair and to my DS, CC'd my boss. The 4th month, my pastor is not coming to see me enough. Just proving the point. Well, she was like this. She's a bit difficult with everybody. There was a Sunday she made it to church. She made it to church. And this congregation had fellowship before service. That was when everybody milled around. I walk in. This member's sitting in the middle of the fellowship hall, and everyone else is like on the walls. Right? Giving her all the space. And I walk in, I'm like, "Lynette!" Lynette! That's not her name. It's the name of my bishop. Lynette! She's going to find that so funny. I'm like, "Lynette, it's great to see you." She looks up at me and she goes, "Don't lie to me, Pastor. I know you don't like me." I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. Everybody's just horrified. Just horrified. I walk up and I took a bet. I took a gamble. I walk right in. I get my face right up to her, put my hands on her shoulder. I just go, Lynette, you know I love you. You know you're one of my favorites. So please, quiet down. And this 88-year-old lady shriveled and went, all of a sudden, the smile on her face. And she turns and she goes, "Yeah, you do love me." Now that was a bet. Because the number of times I've bet that, there have been times where the person just yelled back at me. Right? Because difficult people are sometimes just difficult. She had had a hard life and she had a reason to be hard towards everybody, including me. I'm not holding that against her. But that starting with kindness, with this whole expression that she is beheld by God, before I even talk to her, gives me an opportunity to be grace to her. And she went from a hard as nails 88-year-old lady to one of my confirmation students in a second. How do you do that? And sometimes it's not as dramatic. Sometimes it's the small things of being able to give people respect and value in the small interactions. When you make eye contact with the person making your change at the gas station, you treat the waiter or waitress with a sense of humanity. Sometimes it's being able to have a pleasant conversation, being able to speak to somebody, to hear them out, to grow in social graces, to be a good listener. I got this friend named Chuck. Talking to him when you talk to my friend Chuck, you might as well be in an African-American church or a Pentecostal church. You start telling him about your day, he's like, yeah, tell me more. He's just got this active listening to you. Like there's times where you're talking to somebody and they got that look in their eyes like, did I leave the gas on at home? Was the temperature right? With Chuck, you know he's in your day. Right? Active listening. Or do you know how to offer your own vulnerabilities? If somebody dares to tell you their story, somebody actually offers their lived experience, do you know when it's appropriate to offer yours in return? If you find yourself being told in a story, most folks are so scared to over-talk to you. Like most people are even with me, I don't want to tell you my whole life story. I'm like, that's my job. You get to tell your whole life story to me. If somebody does that for you, ask 3 questions. because that's the way to being a good listener. Just they tell a story that you completely reside with, you have something that harmonizes with. Ask 3 more stories before you put it in. You don't want to be a one-upper. If I tell you a story about my kids, and you raised kids, ask me 3 stories about what it's like for me to raise kids before you tell me about how it was when you were raising kids. It'll honestly change the whole dynamic. That person will walk away feeling like you were listening to them, not waiting for your turn to speak. Do you let people be them? This is the challenge of every church that says we welcome all people. Because if you welcome everybody, if you behold them the way God beholds them, that means they're going to come as people. Another church I was a part of, a few folks with developmental disabilities. Had a guy who walked up and down the aisle, muttering to himself. Now, this has happened here where we've preached and there's a kid or two who you can't get a hold of, and it's just this moment. And people will have that social pressure. I've been the dad in that situation. But when you get an adult with disabilities, that's not on anybody. There's not a parent to change. There's not even a culture. What do? Do you let them be them? Because there are congregations where it's not okay to even be them. Communion had a moment. This is a blending of stories. In that story, we had communion, and back in those days, it's pre-COVID, so we still had the 1 cup where you got to dip your fingers in it. You all remember? I got finger stew by the end of it. I'm kidding. I was the one handing out the bread, and the criticism I always got was I was handing out sandwiches. Because I just gave you enough that you knew you were getting in there. And I'm standing there, and I'm handing out like bread to everybody, and this brother of mine comes up. He's got some disability going on, and I hand him the bread, and he just eats it and walks away. And I'm like, well, that happens. He turns around, comes back. We only had 1 cup, 1 chalice. He puts his whole hand in the chalice, pulls it out, and it just went back to his seat. I've got like 10 more people I'm serving communion to. They're just frozen in place. I just turn to the person holding the cup. I'm like, you can set that down. I then proceed to give a little message just saying, communion is communion in each of the elements. You can have just bread, and it matters. And that guy is welcome back every communion. I'm not about to ever say you don't get to come. You bring your whole self. And I ask anybody who joins the church, anybody who calls themselves a member of a church, that we practice that no matter how hard it may get. Because we have received freely. God so loved us. I have felt my worth. I know my value. And I want everyone to know the same. Because when the soul feels its worth, what's the next line of the song? A thrill of hope. You want hope? Know your worth. And that's what changes everything. That's what gives you the vision that tomorrow can be better than today. And it's in that moment the smoldering wick isn't quenched and the bruised reed will not be crushed. It's all I can ask for anyone this Advent season. Amen.